Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Mr. Schwartz's Art Hour. And on this episode we're going to be learning how to do something fairly romantic. We're going to learn how to do a rose, fully detailed and everything. Meet me on the other side of the scene transition and we'll get ourselves started. So what we actually are going to do is we're going to come around here to the middle of the page and we're going to be drawing a very fancy S to get our rose started. So what that means is we're going to start with the inside of the S being curled in before moving out and around just like a normal S shape would be. It's going to come all the way up and it's going to stop just before we hit there. So you should end up with a shape like this. Again, it's a sort of fancy looking S shape with just this end of the S curled in a little ways. So I'll zoom in on that now. That should get the general idea of how big it should be, and we'll keep on. Alright, that should help you see the S a little bit better. So you can see that it is fairly rounded when we get down here and a little bit flatter on top. And so now that you've finished go ahead and doing that, we're going to start adding the petals onto our rose, because what we draw is the base form for the inside bud of the rose. So what we're going to do is first we're going to draw the first main petal shape. So we are going to come to right here to the end of this S that we had before. And we're going to start by drawing a line that curves down slightly and points a little bit and then curves back up and down into the S roundabouts here. So it curves a little bit, has a little bit of a wave, it points, and then it ends right here. Next, we're going to come back to this point and we're going to drag another curving shape out from there to roundabouts here, and then just like we did here, we'll point it a little bit, give it a little bit of a point, and then start having it swing around like so. It's going to start to go inside of the S. And it's going to end by connecting with the curly part of the S right here. So you should end up with a shape that looks like this. Apologies for my cracking voice, but I talked a lot today and I'm sort of losing it at this point. I'm just going to make this part of my bud a little bit more rounded. There we go. That looks nice. Alright, so now we have that all done. We're going to come back inside to this middle part of the S, and first we're just going to put a line over here like this, just another curving line to start adding a few more petal shapes into here. And now we're going to come a little bit further up here. We're going to come to roundabouts right here, as you see me making a little mark right here. We're going to start curving this line so that as it curves and as it begins to exit the S, it runs right along the edge of this shape that we drew before curving out up like so, and then it's going to, just like we did here and here, it's going to curve and point out before it ends by joining up with the shape that we did before. So this shouldn't go any higher than what you have here. It should end so that when you're done with the bump, by making this point right here, it should curve back up into here nicely. I'm going to see on mine that maybe I can probably bring this down a little bit more. Like so. Okay, there we go. That looks a little bit better. Alright, and to finish this whole thing up, we're going to come back down to this area here where we finished our first line that we drew. And we're going to draw a line that curves out from there and just joins up with this shape at about here, right here. So from here to here, just make a curving line so it looks about the same as what we did over on this side. So at this point, you can sort of balance the two of them out, make sure that they're both curving around about the same, direction. And just clean things up a little bit. There we go. So you should end up with a shape that looks like this. And now that we've added those few extra little petal shapes, we have the inside of the rose. And now we're going to move right along here. We're going to keep it up. We're going to keep the steam train going. We're going to come to right below this point up here on the left, on the top left-hand corner. And we're going to start drawing another curve. You'll notice that the petals are made up of all curves and points. So it's going to point, so it's not going to go out too far from here. Only roundabouts that far, because we are going to be adding more petals onto it. And it's going to curve down, and it's going to stop at about here. We're not going to connect it to anything just yet. But as I said, don't make these petals that we're going to draw here and here too large, because we are going to be adding extra petals onto this around them. So to work with this to finish it, we can just draw a curving shape that connects here into the large bud. So now we're going to take this curve, bring it out a little bit more, point it, and now we're going to drag this curve all the way around the bud until it hits about the middle of this line right here. So it's going to curve around and curve in right here. I'll clean up my messy lines just like so. There we go. I'll erase out those two little circles. All right. So now you can really hopefully start to see what's going on with the flower here. And we have two more petals to add here, and then we're going to add some leaves. So to add the next petal, we're going to come to this shape right here. So you can see me. We're going to move to this shape right here, roundabouts a little past halfway. So over on the left side, we're going to start to draw another curving shape that curves down until it is below this shape, this point here. And it itself is going to, what a shock, point. Sorry about that, the camera started curving. It started coming loose from its jack. So I'm going to finish the curve until it ends about here. So again, you want to try and make sure that everything is all nice and smooth in terms of the curves. Don't make any part of the curve too sharp or anything like that. Keep things smooth and pretty. And now to finish off up here, we're going to come over to this left-hand petal, and we're going to start drawing yet another curving shape that curves out and above, like so. It's going to have another point before it curves down into this petal, just like so. So that when all is said and done, you will have a rather nice looking flower shape. And this is the base flower that we're going to have. We're not going to add any more petals onto it. You could if you wish. You would just have to add a few more petals on using the exact same method that we did before. But we're going to stick to fairly simple with this one. So you should end up with a shape that looks roughly like this. Alright, now that we've all got this going, we're now going to add 3 leaves to this thing to sort of help it all get finished up. So the leaves are the exact same method that we used to create the petals. We just make a curving line that goes out to a point and then curves back into the petal. Only difference with this one is that you can add maybe 1 or 2 lines like this to help distinguish this from there for right now. So it's a little bit smaller than the petals. Sure, you can see that. And we'll come down to here in the bottom right hand corner. We'll draw another leaf, and I'm going to try and make this one look a little bit different from the other leaf, just to try and make it all look a little bit more like real life as opposed to all of them being the exact same shape. Everything is always a little bit different. So this one's a little bit fatter on the curve as opposed to this one, which was a little bit on the smoother side. So this one looks like that. And then we're going to finish off by making another leaf right up in this general area. There's no specific, real, correct place to put the leaves. They're just leaves. So you don't have to put them in the exact same place I did. Just make roundabouts 3 of them. You could add more if you really wanted to, but you don't want to overpower the image of the rose itself. Alright, so we have our rose and our leaves all drawn, and normally this will be the point in the lesson where we would stop. But we're not going to stop this time, we're going to keep going. Because in order to make this look a little bit nicer, we're actually going to shade it. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take my trusty 6B pencil after I sharpen it a little bit, and I'm going to come back through here and I'm going to darken up all of my outline, all of my lines here. Okay, so I'm all finished up with that, and you saw that while I was doing that, most likely that I went over this in one single unbroken line as much as possible, just tracing over what I did before. The reason is, now that I have all the base forms taken care of with this thing, I want to try and eliminate the very sketchy nature of the lines that I had. This helps make it look a little bit cleaner, a little bit more sophisticated, and now it's much easier for me to draw with a single unbroken line, because now I can just trace along what I drew before, as opposed to trying to both draw the form and draw it perfectly the very first lines that I do. So I'm going to let you go ahead and do this as well. Just try and make it all one single line, and the goal is to just get this a little bit darker because it's going to help us out in a few minutes. Alright, so now that we all have this taken care of, we're going to move on to the actual shading. Now you're going to see me using my mechanical pencil for this, but for you, this light is basically just the same as the 2H pencils that you've got that I've been handing out. So if you want to use a mechanical pencil, that's fine, but you can also use the 2H pencils that I've got. So, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to come to this inside shape here, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit to help you see it. There we are. So, we're going to come to this inside shape, and we're just going to start putting in a fairly heavy layer of pencil lead into here. This is probably going to be one of the darker sections of it when we're all done. So you do want to make it dark, but you don't want to make it pitch black. Alright, so a very dark shade of gray, shall we say. So something that looks a little bit like that. So fairly dark, all things considered. And then we're going to come to this shape right here, and we're going to shade that lighter than what we did here. And it's a very simple way to do that. All you have to do is apply less pressure when you're filling in right here, because the harder you press on the pencil, the darker the color will be. The lighter you press, the lighter it will be. It really doesn't matter what this looks like right now, because we're going to be coming back through this later and cleaning it up. So we just want to get the layer of graphite gotten down right now. I really don't know what I just said, but you get the general idea. Lay down a layer of graphite is the basic point that I was making there. So you want to try and stay within the shape as much as possible, and then when you get down to about here, where you can't see, but now you can, you get down to about here, you can start to darken it up again, because this part is curling down into the rest of the bud. So when you're done, you should end up with something that looks a little bit like that. Fairly even layer here, and then when it gets down to here, it gets a little bit darker. Fairly simple so far. Really? Right? Yeah, no problems. So now we're going to come back up here. We're going to start doing a little bit more detail work. So I'm going to make this part a little bit darker around the edge. I'm going to place a very light layer of graphite in this little area that we marked off at the very beginning. So then right next to it, it's going to be darker. This way I can help distinguish everything from everything else around it, because if all this was the exact same tone, it'd be difficult to tell what parts of the flower were actually what. So that's why we have this black line here to help distinguish that. But also, as much as possible, you don't want to put two tones that are the exact same right next to each other. You want to try and separate them out as much as possible. So as we start moving out here, you'll see I start to press a little bit harder with my pencil to get a little bit darker of a tone out here. Getting a little bit lighter as I get down here, because I don't want these two tones to be the exact same. So you should end up with something that looks like this. It looks a little bit messy right now, but trust me, we will be taking care of that later on. You just have to be patient with me. We're going to come to this petal form now, and we're going to make this very light. About as light as this, maybe even lighter. Just like so. So it's so light that you probably might not even be able to see it on there, but trust me, there is a layer of graphite on this area. And to finish things off, we're going to come down here to this bottom section right here. And we're going to start by making this left-hand side fairly dark. So about as dark as we did for up inside here. Making sure you can see me. My camera has a tendency to move on me, especially when I'm shaking the desk as much as I am. Now as I get down out to the middle, I'll still make this area up here a little bit darker, but this part in the middle should be a little bit lighter. Because since this object is round, as it gets closer to us, it's going to get a little bit lighter, and as it moves away, it's going to appear to get a little bit darker. Then it's going to get a little bit darker over here, but not as dark as this. So again, if you're not able to do it exactly the same way I am, that's fine. Just as long as you have a few areas of dark and a few areas of light, that'll be more than enough later on. And now we're going to move on to the petals, the larger petals. And what we're actually going to do for this petal right here is we're going to draw another curving shape inside of it that looks a little bit like so. So basically what we do is divide that petal into another smaller shape. And this shape here, now on this side, is going to be dark. So we're going to start all the way back here and make sure that this is darker than what we have here and here. Now this shading is fairly pretty much the same all the way down. So that makes it a little bit easier. So this is showing us what's called the cast shadow, which you all know what that is. It's the shadow that's cast when something's near a light source. In this case, we're pretending that there is a light source that is causing all of this different shading to come about. Now right here, those two are a little bit too alike, so I'm going to make this part a little bit heavier on the dark to make sure they're separated out. Right, so we got that taken care of, and then the rest of it is going to be filled in with a much lighter tone. Just have to make sure that this tone is lighter than the one you just placed down. Plain and simple, just like that. And now, I'll let you take another quick look at that. And now I'm going to move over to this side. So I'm going to grab my trusty paper towel, cover up my piece, like that, so my hand won't smear it. And I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to shade this all fairly pretty much the same tone. Just a quick layer gets laid down. So that's fairly simple, just like so. All right, and now we move up to the top petal, and with the top petal, we're going to make this side of the petal darker than here and here, again to help separate them out a little bit, just a tad bit darker. And as we move closer towards this petal here, we're going to get lighter. And get slightly darker as we move down to the end. So on the left side it's a little bit darker, gets a little bit lighter in the middle, and a little bit darker at the end. And to finish off this petal down here, we're going to make it a fairly medium tone here, up right around this section. As it moves down, we're going to make it a little bit darker right around the base of the bud. And it's going to be lighter out here on the edge. A little bit darker right over here. and then finishing it all up. So yours should look something like that. And now we're going to move right along. We're going to finish up the base shading with the leaves. And with the leaves, what we're going to do is we're going to make them probably some of the darker spots on here, just to separate them out from the rose petals as much as possible. So at the point where they're nearest to the flower, we're going to make it pretty dark, and then gradually get it softer and softer as it moves out. If your shading does end up going out off of the edge like mine does, just grab your eraser and clean it up along the edge. No problem. Down here we'll do largely the same thing. Make it pretty dark down here before it becomes lighter. Just like that. And we'll end over on this side with this one. Again, making it darker at the base. And lighter as it reaches the top. Okay everybody, so that was a pretty long section dealing with the shading, and thank you for sticking with me this long. So what's going to happen next is I'm going to be blending all this together, and I'm going to do this in sped up fashion. So I'll just tell you what I'm going to be doing first, and then I will do it. So I'm going to just be taking this, which is called a blending stump, and just running it across this entire surface here to get all of the scribble marks taken out and get everything looking a lot smoother. Now if you don't have one of these, that's okay. You can just use a piece of paper towel that you just wrap around your finger like so, and then just rub it in like that. Or if you really want to, you can go and get one of these. They're available in really any arts and crafts store like Hobby Lobby. This is where I get most of my things from. And so I'm going to be taking care of all this, and then I'm going to come back to you when it's all finished. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so that's all taken care of, and no doubt you saw during that last part that I did come in with my eraser. In this case, it's a kneaded eraser, but really any eraser will work just fine. And I came into some of these sections here, and I made them a little bit brighter. Because the problem was that some of these sections were looking very, very similar in terms of the overall tone. It was looking a little bit too gray all around, so I just came to some of these specific sections and just used my eraser to draw in some light. So I didn't go through exactly where I placed these because I'm figuring that you're able to just look at this and emulate it if you wish. And that is that, ladies and gentlemen. We are completely finished. I'd like to thank you all for watching this video all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. And hopefully you enjoyed this video, and hopefully you learned a little bit something at the same time. This has been Mr. Schwartz's Art Hour, and I will see you all next time. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned, because there will be a non-Valentine's Day related video coming up right after this one, depending on when I get it uploaded. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time.